First of all, Mr. President, we thank you for your time. I do have to ask you, is it strange to be in the United States? Our country bombed your country, and now you are here. What's that like?
Well, in the name of the Almighty, the most gracious, the most merciful, first of all, we came here to participate in the United Nations General Assembly based on the premise of the United Nations to create an atmosphere of dialogue, to be next to one another, to prevent criminal, aggressive behavior and overcome problems and challenges. We have come, of course, but unfortunately, we don't see those objectives, but of course coming to participate is better than being absent.
I hear you. Let's get to the news of the day and the potential snapback sanctions. Why won't Iran allow UN inspectors to inspect all the bombed out nuclear facilities?
This is the news that they portray to you folks. We have come to an agreement with the IAEA in a specific framework, and in the framework that we had come to an agreement over with the European Troika, to reestablish trust with the agency, to give them the necessary opportunities to conduct inspections, in addition to having access to enriched material. In all of these frameworks, we were ready to adhere to our commitments. And it is the United States that doesn't want to enter this framework, doesn't want to embark on a path of peace and stability. And before reaching this point, as easily, they tore up the JCPOA.
But to be clear, your country will allow all the UN inspectors to all of the nuclear facilities that were bombed out. I just want to be clear on that.
These have already been talked about at a time when they were going to delay the snapback mechanism. They were going to begin the inspections, but unfortunately the issue is that they do not wish to embark upon this path.
If the votes don't go your way and the snapback sanctions come back, will you ban the UN inspectors from Iran?
If they accuse us now falsely that we're not allowing them to inspect our nuclear installations, how do they think that this will be realized after the implementation of the snapback mechanism? We have allowed them to conduct the inspections within the frameworks of international laws, as well as the Non-Proliferation Treaty, to which we have been a signatory. They didn't want to do this and move according to this framework. And unfortunately, the path that we see in our region that Israel has undertaken, embarked upon, bombed at will 6 or more different countries, that entity is being praised. But we are the ones that are being subjected to sanctions. So this is only a law of brute and pure force, nothing else.
Mr. President, I'm not sure if you've seen the reports today, but there is this new report in the Washington Post. It shows a satellite image. This is the Pickaxe Mountain. And it's alleging that right now Iran is building yet another secret nuclear facility. What do you say to this?
If they are really telling the truth, we have come to an agreement most recently with the IAEA. They can come and inspect on the ground. To put something out based on purported satellite photography, it's not pertinent. In order to create frameworks that are not based in reality and fact, would it not be easier and much more tangible and verifiable to have inspections in person on the ground? But they wish to build a certain construct in order to make the world accept that we are moving towards the path of weaponization, and we are seeking nuclear weapons. We have announced time and time again, relentlessly, that we are not seeking nuclear weapons. In what language do we need to transmit this to the world? But this is the concept they wish to portray and may turn into reality, that we're seeking nuclear weapons. It is absolutely and unambiguously wrong. We are seeking to change the dynamics.
You mentioned nuclear weapons. Where exactly is that roughly 900 pounds of enriched uranium right now that is publicly unaccounted for?
That's not very difficult. With the IAEA, the inspectors can come and conduct the needed inspections and inspect the targeted sites and verify anything that needs to be verified. We were under the auspices and the inspections, the most stringent regimes, keep in mind, of inspections. But unfortunately, these international entities failed to do the right thing. But it's not a difficult thing. It's not a very challenging thing. In order to verify and conduct inspections, why is it that they're not taking advantage of the opportunity and being present on the ground to do so?
Those inspectors came out publicly before the 12-day war and said they were being denied certain access. Is that not what happened in Iran?
In the process, it's important to distinguish between different occurrences. There was the Iranian legislative body that passed certain laws in reaction to certain actions taken, and we reached an agreement with the European Troika and the Trump administration for them to come in, conduct the inspections, peripheral to which or parallel to which the dialogue and negotiations would continue, giving everyone ample time to resolve outstanding issues and then come to a point of determining whether the snapback mechanism would be deleted, if you will, forever in a satisfactory manner to all parties.
For our American viewers at home, how do you explain that the reports that you're enriched uranium is at 60%, but all you need is 3.5% for civilian power purposes? Why is that uranium enriched to 60%, which is much closer to an atomic bomb?
What is clear, the agreement that was reached and then President Trump tore up in his first term, all of this was agreed upon. According to that agreement, every signatory to the agreement was going to fulfill certain commitments. We lived up fully, verifiably, to every single one of our commitments. When America tore up the agreement, the European countries signatory to the treaty also left passively. They didn't say so publicly, but in effect they did. The companies that had come into Iran and formed certain partnerships, they left the country. We were put outside of certain frameworks of international monetary and commercial transfers. This doesn't mean that it was proven that we were seeking weaponization. It is not for me to say. I refer everyone's attention to the first and most preeminent authority in the country, the religious leader of the country, issued fatwa and repeated multiple times that it is unholy or haram to seek weaponization, to seek nuclear weapons, to seek any type of weapons of mass destruction. This is rooted in our ideology. It is unambiguous, and it is not changeable. So nothing has prevented us from having the fullest cooperation with the IAEA.
President Trump says, why are you seeking nuclear power if you're sitting on all that oil? What do you say to that?
Well, you see, nuclear energy is not just for nuclear weapons. A lot of diagnostic tools and imaging tools in medicine, which is my professional field, we do need nuclear energy. In various industrial sectors, we need access. In the agricultural sector, we need access to this technology and science. Why is it that we must be denied the right to have access to the indigenous technology that we need? Because they falsely wish to believe and portray to the world that we're seeking nuclear weapons. We have been signatories to the NPT. We have been under the auspices of the most stringent and intrusive regimes of inspections by the IAEA. Why is it that they do not wish to embark upon this path with us?
Israel and the U.S. are going to meet tomorrow in the White House, as you probably know. There is this report I just showed you about this new, some are alleging, secret nuclear facility. Do you worry that more war is coming to Iran?
Well, you see, we're not afraid of war. We do not seek war. President Trump has said that his administration has come to create peace, but the path that they have embarked upon will set fire to the entire region. It cannot just be that you conduct an aerial sortie with 100 aircraft maybe and bomb away certain targets. And it's undeniable that an unprecedented unity has been formed between regional countries, particularly the Islamic countries. It cannot be that a certain entity is formed called Israel and prevents and creates the siege of a territory of a certain group of people, prevents them access to food and medicine and the basics of dignified human life. Why are they allowed to conduct themselves in this manner? And they are allowed to take away the most fundamental human rights. What world is this? What international laws are these? Why is it that we cannot, according to those international laws, have access to our rights as well as everyone else have access to theirs without impediment?
I appreciate your answer, Mr. President. I'm going to ask you it in a different format. Is Iran preparing for more war?
We have never started a war. We will never be starting any wars, but whomever attacks us, we will do our utmost to give them the strongest answer. We will certainly augment our capabilities on a daily basis so as to prevent anyone from attacking us. Do you know why in Gaza every single day Palestinians, innocent civilians, are being bombarded? Because they have no power to defend themselves. Over 65,000 innocent civilians, men, women, children, are being starved to death. They've been bombed for almost 2 years. Within what humanitarian framework, within what international law are these allowed, are these behaviors and comportments allowed? We wish to seek what is rightfully ours according to international laws, but we are condemned for something that we're not guilty of. Now, is this looking to you like anything other than the rule and law of the jungle?
Take me back to the 12-day war. As the leader of a country, as the president, what was it like to see your country bombed, your top scientists killed, top military generals assassinated?
It's natural. It's normal. If they come overnight and target your most elite commanders, and the world just watches in silence, and to add insult to injury, certain countries, they only defend such illegal aggression. Innocent people would only pray that the so-called human rights and international laws would come to their defense. In one night, they assassinated and martyred our scientists. What was their sin? Because they thought maybe this individual one day may aid in obtaining a nuclear weapon. It has no foundation in logic. Where in the world does someone assassinate in another country, the citizen of another country, the scientific elite of another country, because they think wrongly that one day that person may aid the country in obtaining nuclear weapons? It's unthinkable. Throughout the world, there has been unprecedented hate formed in result of the aggressive and unjustifiable behavior of Israel.
I heard you mention the unjust war. I think that's the phrase you used. Were you personally upset none of your allies came to your defense, including Russia?
In our lives and according to our belief and ideologies, the one we lean on and the support and whose support we seek is the Almighty and our people. We do not seek the support of an individual or a government or a country. We wish to have healthy relations with the entire world. But it isn't so that if someone doesn't come to our aid, we will surrender. We are capable with the cohesion and unity that has been created between our people. And in result of Israel's illegal aggression, the cohesion and unity has only increased. We are fully capable to defend themselves, which has nothing to do with the weapon system that you have access to. If people believe in their own capacity and capability, and if we behave and comport ourselves towards our people with fairness and justice and compassion, certainly the feeling created mutually will be the best defense.
I understand that you were injured in some of the bombings. Can you tell our American viewers exactly what happened to you during the bombings?
This is again one of these comportments that would be highly illegal and immoral, but they're allowed to do that. They hit us because they were seeking to martyr us like everyone else. We are not afraid of death and martyrdom. We have lived our lives. I have lived my life. We have served to the extent of our capabilities, our country, to the best of our capabilities. We only seek to live in peace and stability with the rest of the region, the rest of the world, but it is Israel that wrongfully believes that everyone is their enemy, whereas unfortunately they've shown in their behavior that they're everyone's most dangerous enemy. They're the ones driving people from their homelands. They are the ones starving people's children and entire families to death, and unfortunately the world just watches in silence.
You mentioned you're a doctor, so I'll ask you as a doctor, where exactly were you injured? There was reports you were injured in your leg. Is there any scars that you bear that you can show us?
It wasn't anything special. We can just say that it was a hematoma formed in the region of the knee. We drew out the needed liquid and blood, and after that, we got over it.
Did you fear for your life?
They hit that specific target and location in which we were with 15 different ordnances, seeking to destroy it and level it. If they're telling the truth, if their targets were our nuclear installations, why did they assassinate and bombard innocent civilians? If America's aim is truly for us not to have nuclear installations, well, you have bombed those targets. Why are you hitting our people? You have bombed those targets. Why are you putting us under stringent sanctions and hurting our people? America keeps supporting unquestionably, unconditionally, and unfairly the comportment of Israel in the region, but we will find a way and resolve our problems. The entire world is not comprised of America and America's friends.
There was clearly an intelligence breakdown. Do you believe that UN inspectors are agents of Israel, as has been alleged by some in Iran?
Well, you see, it is undeniably true that we did have certain weaknesses in the field of intelligence, but how does that occur? We cannot say for certain X or Y individual were the guilty parties. As far as inspectors that you mentioned, a lot of the locations of our nuclear scientists, yes, those can be ascertained perhaps by technological and electronic means, but others factors to complete the picture for the outside enemy would have to be brought in via human intelligence or espionage. So if, again, the issue is if we're members of the IAEA in good standing, if we're members of the NPT in good standing, those organizations should not have allowed any country to attack those installations that were under their auspices, but no condemnation.
So you don't trust the UN inspectors? I just want to be clear about this.
Lack of trust is different with the fact that we are living in this framework. Therefore, we need to adapt to certain things. Why are we physically here today? We have come here in order to ascertain whether we can reach a mutual understanding with certain parties, and we're able to aid one another to build the world with the slogan of the UN in the 80th year, to form unity, progress via unity. But unfortunately, certain entities, they're tearing countries apart. They are taking away human rights. They are taking away human dignity. And then they say we are bringing peace and stability. It's baffling.
Speaking of human rights, some have said there were up to 21,000 people arrested in Iran after the bombings. What do you say to that allegation?
I don't have off the top of my head a specific number because that's the judiciary in charge of these such matters. But as you mentioned earlier, certain intelligence weaknesses, the foreign enemy perhaps has succeeded in fooling certain internal entities with monetary prizes, if you will, incentives of different types. But to the extent that we were capable, we have tried to overcome that. But to speak of numbers of 21,000 or 25,000, I highly doubted that that's an accurate number.
You spoke about your trip here and the reason why you're here. The Europeans have asked that you negotiate with the Americans. Have you been able to negotiate? Have you been able to talk with the Americans?
Our foreign minister was supposed to have a sit-down with their counterparts. But before reaching that point, they were telling us that before reaching that point, to sit across the table from one another, you must accept these conditions. Then this takes away the essence and meaning of dialogue and negotiations, because what are we negotiating about? So America, that pretends to be the leader of democracy and freedom, they did not allow a great number of participants in our group. They were denied visas, entry visas. They didn't allow us to be at the same lodging that we were in the previous years that was much closer to the United Nations building. They didn't allow the Iranian participants to perhaps go within certain perimeters in this area and conduct face-to-face meetings, in-person meetings with their counterparts from various countries. And they keep saying in their media that Iran is seeking instability, Iran is stoking the flames of so on and so forth. But of course we will not succumb and kneel to bullying. We are not willing to trade our dignity and accept something that is counter to international laws and international norms and standards.
To be clear, there's been no communication between the two countries during this UN General Assembly?
Telephonically, our foreign minister has had certain telephonic contacts with Mr. Witkoff, and via third-party contacts. I had, for example, myself...
Nothing meaningful.
Well, with France and the Europeans, we did come to a conclusion, draft, if you will, conclusion, quasi-conclusion. A couple of times they were rejected, a few times there were meetings scheduled. We came to agreements with the Europeans on 2 occasions, and America rejected those agreements twice. So it is America that's preventing an agreement between us. They keep saying and pretending that we in Iran wish to have separate hidden installations, which is ridiculous in this day and age to think that someone can think of creating something secretive, if you will. But they do not wish to let us get to that point.
Mr. President, you mentioned secret installations. If you don't have secret installations, what is this? What would you call this?
This is not very difficult. We had told them that they can come in and conduct inspections. Why are they bringing back the snapback mechanism? We told them unambiguously, clearly, it's not difficult to show pictures without proof behind it. This is not difficult. Come on the ground and inspect in person. At a time, you can tell us this when we can and provide such things as so-called proof when we're preventing you from conducting in-person inspections. If you really had good intentions, you could delay the snapback implementation for 3 months, 4 months. If during these 3 to 4 months we all don't come to an agreement, then you can implement it. But within certain fantastical portrayals that they wish to portray us as something that we're not.
The way we are sitting right now, would you sit across from President Trump like this to negotiate, to talk to him?
Well, you see, the challenge is not really sitting down and talking in person. President Trump says, Iran must not reach nuclear weapon capability. We are certainly ready. We fully agree. We do not wish to reach such an objective. Let's tear down the wall of mistrust and distrust so that we can establish that our interlocutor has been sincere, that we can sit down and resolve every problem from A to Z. That's not realistic. Proper management of a negotiation is to aim for one of two outstanding issues, resolve them one at a time, based on trust building. From that point, move on to the third, fourth, and so on. We reached an agreement with America on for informing the JCPOA. We fully implemented and lived up to our commitments every single time, as verified by the IAEA.
But I want to be clear. Would you meet with President Trump?
Until such time that this expectation that President Trump has announced, all he has to do is issue a command for his command to be executed. When we see that executed and implemented, then we're certainly willing to talk.
Explain. What is the one command you would say?
The command that he says Iran must absolutely not have access to nuclear weapons, and we will take the sanctions away and open the path to investments and international business. Of course, we're willing and ready to do that.
So you would publicly state you are going to abandon any type of further enriching of the uranium, any sort of march towards a nuclear weapon to meet with the United States?
We will certainly do that because it has been our intention all along. What our intention hasn't been is to pursue nuclear weapons. When we say we don't seek nuclear weapons, of course we have, and we will keep cooperating and collaborating with every international organization in the world for them to ascertain what we're stating.
In the spirit of diplomacy, is there any message you have for Benjamin Netanyahu?
Netanyahu doesn't need a message. In the eyes of the world, in the eyes of the International Criminal Court, he has been condemned for his comportment and crimes. What he has done and acts he has committed, what have children done? Why has he prevented them from food, water, medicine, formula? What kind of humanity is this that we've built in the world? That in the face of all of these countries that exist throughout the world, men, women, young, old, they are killing everyone indiscriminately, and those they don't kill via weapon systems, they are starving them to death and destroying their homes on top of their head. How can you talk to such entities? If Netanyahu is truly pretending to be a decent human being, he should return to the most fundamental framework of human behavior.
How would you describe Iran's current relationship with Hamas today?
We don't have a special relationship. We defend it as a representative of a certain group of people. Hamas, remember, was chosen through voting by the people of Gaza. It's undeniable that the people of that area for decades have been blockaded illegally, driven from their homes, killed indiscriminately. So they sought to elect them as leaders in order to resolve their outstanding issues and oppressive conditions. Under the conditions that they were placed in, they reacted towards Israel's actions. Now, they carried out certain acts towards Israel. Israel is retaliating. Retaliate against them. Why are you retaliating disproportionately and indiscriminately?
علت این که ما به عنوان پزشک معمولا همیشه دنبال علت بیماری هستیم، نه معلولایی که هست. حماس، حزب الله و همه این جریان‌هایی که شما می‌بینید معلولن. علت تجاوز، علت جنایت‌هایی است که اینا انجام میدن، علت مسائلی است که الان تو منطقه داره رخ میده، خونه مردم رو خراب میکنن، زندگیشون رو نابود میکنن، تحقیر میکنن، اجازه توسعه نمیدن. هر انسانی در یه چنین وضعیتی عکس‌العمل نشان خواهد داد.
Mr. President, I apologize. The translation has stopped in the middle of your answer. Let me see if they can fix this technical issue. If I can ask politely, if you can continue from where we left off, maybe a minute from where we stopped, if you remember the thought.
حالا نمیدونم در راجع به چی بود. ما به عنوان یه پزشک
I myself, as a physician by profession, when I examine a patient,
در حقیقت علامت‌ها
in
رو
essence,
هیچ وقت
I
به
do
عنوان بیماری نمی‌بینیم.
consider
از
the
علامت‌ها به
symptoms,
ریشه بیماری
but I
پی
use those
می‌بریم. علت این
symptoms to
علامت‌ها چیه؟
seek the root cause of the illness.
اون چی که این گروه‌ها درست
What you're
شدن در
referring
منطقه
to as
و دارن با
groups in the
اسرائیل یا با هر
region,
گروه
be
دیگه‌ای می‌جنگن،
it Hamas,
ریشه به
Hezbollah,
علتش
whomever,
این
and
نیست
have
که
been
اینا
fighting against the oppression
اسمشون
of
رو
Israel,
بذاریم تروریست، اینا تروریستن.
it is not enough to
علت اینه که
label
در
them as
منطقه
terrorists
یه
and
عده تحت
recognize
ستم
them as
قرار
such.
گرفتن.
The root cause of this
حکومتشون
regional
بیرونشون
illness
کردن.
is
یه
that
دوره گرفتن
for
و کشتن.
decades
و
people were
زندگی و حق
illegally and immorally
انسانی
driven
رو
from their
اجازه ندادن
homes,
اونو داشته باشن.
killed indiscriminately,
طبیعی انسان‌ها در
denied the
مقابل
most
چنین
basic rights of
رفتار
human
غیر
life.
انسانی عکس العمل
Of
نشون میده.
course, any human
حماس
being
درست
with a
میشه،
shred
حزب
of
الله
dignity
درست میشه.
and
هر
hope
حزب دیگه‌ای که شما
would
فکر کنید.
do
ولی
their
اگر
their
عدالت و
utmost
انصاف در
to
جامعه
be
پیاده
able
بشه،
to
خود به
react
خود اینا
towards these oppressive
رنگ می‌بازن و
measures.
در جایگاهی قرار می‌گیرن
But
که میشن
if
دولت‌ها،
those
حاکمیت‌ها
oppressions are taken
و
away,
مدیران
if
اداری هر
true
جامعه‌ای
human
هست.
behavior can
آنچه
be
که
brought
امروز
to
در
bear in
منطقه وجود
reality,
داره به خاطر
these
رفتار
organizations and groups wouldn't
غیر
take shape.
انسانی و غیر
What
حقوق
exists
بشری
today in the
است که
region
اسرائیل
is
نه
the
تنها در غزه، نه
inhuman,
تنها در لبنان،
illegal
بلکه در
behavior
تمام
that
منطقه
Israel,
با
not
هر
only
کسی
in
که
Gaza,
خودش
not
می‌خواد
only in
غیر
Lebanon,
ممنوع.
not only in Syria, not only in Yemen.
Does Iran continue to financially support Hamas?
ما مثل همه کشورهای دنیا
Us
کمک‌های
in Iran, as
بشردوستانه‌ای که
any
الان در
country
منطقه
throughout
می‌خواد
the
انجام
world,
بگیره، آماده کمک بشردوستانه‌ای
are
برای
ready and
زندگیشون،
stand
برای
ready to
خوردنشون، برای
continue
معیشتشون،
rendering
برای
humanitarian
درمانشون.
aid
اگه
to
اینو
anyone
یه چیز
in
دیگه‌ای
need
فکر
throughout
می‌کنید،
the region and the
خب
world.
دیگه برمیگرده
But
به
if
نگاه و
anyone
تفسیری که
wishes to
دارن
make
می‌کنن.
something of this that is not
کمک‌های
in
بشردوستانه
reality,
وظیفه همه
that it
کشورها
doesn't
از
exist in
همه
reality, that's
نقاط
their own
دنیا
issue.
دارن برای غزه کمک
Throughout the
می‌کنن.
world,
این رو
aid
به
is
چه
being mobilized
چیزی میشه
and
تفسیر کرد؟
taken towards
کمک‌های
Gaza.
بشردوستانه است.
How can you
ما و هر
describe
کسی که
this?
تحت
These are
ستم باشه
humanitarian
و از دستمون
assistance
بر بیاد،
and aid.
کمک بکنیم، خب
Anyone who is
طبیعتاً
in
کمک
need
کنیم.
as a human being, of course we're going to do our utmost to render aid.
ولی کمک‌های ما
But our
اونقدر
aid
زیاد
and
نمی‌تونه
assistance
باشه، برای اینکه ما
is
خودمون
not
تحت
that
فشاریم.
considerable because
اینجوری نیست
we
ما
are
اونقدر
ourselves
امکانات
under
داریم که خیلی
pressure.
راحت
We
می‌تونیم
do
به
not
هر گونه
have
کمک
the
بکنیم
vast
و اونها خیلی
possibilities of
زیاده.
certain other
ولی در حدی
countries
که
to
بتونیم
do
از
as
خیلی
much
از
as we
مواقعی که
wish
مردم
for
تحت
the
فشار
human beings
باشن،
in
در
need.
هر نقطه‌ای
But
از
to the
دنیا
extent that we
آماده
can,
این کمک‌ها رو
we are
برسونیم.
willing to rush aid to anyone in the world.
You and other countries can disagree about what started the 12-day war, but looking back on it, do you regret, with all the death that came to Iran, all the destruction that came to Iran, not cooperating more with the UN inspectors?
اسرائیل مگر طبق مقررات
Israel
حمله کرده که ما
conducted
پشیمون
this
بشیم.
aggression
ما یا آژانس به خاطر
according to
اینکه
international
همکاری
law
بود،
and
آژانس که
international
می‌اومد ایران رو
frameworks.
بازدیدم می‌کرد.
The agency was coming to Iran and conducting inspections.
اسرائیل وکیل مدافع دنیاست.
Is
اگر یک جایی
Israel
یه قانون اجرا
the
نشد، این بیاد مثلا
retained
مداخله حمله
lawyer
بکنه.
of the world and
اصلا
international
سوال اینه چرا باید
agencies?
آژانس
The
اسرائیل
question
رو
is,
محکوم نکنه؟
why is it that the agency
اسرائیل
doesn't
در
condemn
کجای این
Israel?
سازمان‌های بین‌المللی قرار گرفته؟
Where is Israel's
اسرائیل
place
همون
in
جایی است
certain
که
international
خود دادگاه
organizations?
بین‌المللی لاهه
Israel now truly
مسئولینش
sits
رو
in
و
the center of organizations such as the
مدیران
International
اصلیش رو
Criminal
محکوم
Court,
کرده و گفته هر جا رسیدید اونا رو باید
condemned for
بگیرید.
their behavior
آمریکاست که در
and arrest
حقیقت
warrants issued.
او کسی رو که
So
حکم داده
it
رو
is
به
America
اصطلاح تحریم
that
کرده.
then,
یعنی توی
subject to
دنیا
sanctions,
هیچ کی حق
those who
نداره درست
issued
قضاوت کنه.
that legal
قضاوت آن چیزی است که
opinion
آمریکا
and
به
that
اسرائیل
arrest
می‌کنه.
warrant. So the
این
truth
خودش
of the world,
قاعده
unfortunately,
جدیدی است که
has
در دنیا
become
راه
what
افتاده.
America and Israel
بر
want.
اساس هر چی دل من خواست باید اجرا کنم.
Anything that I
اسرائیل
want, I can
خودش
implement.
تصمیم میگیره.
Israel
یکی
decides
رو متهم
by
می‌کنه.
itself,
اتهام
accuses
کرد.
someone falsely,
دادگاهی میکنه، حکم براش صادر
becomes
میکنه،
judge
حکم
and
صادر
jury,
کرد، اجرا میکنه،
implements
در هر نقطه‌ای که از دنیا باشه.
the punishment anywhere in the world.
قوانین حقوقی، قضایی
What
قابل اجراست.
legal framework is this?
But the UN inspectors had come out and said publicly to the world that you were not cooperating with full inspections, that they were being denied access.
از چه چیزی از چه چیزی ما جلوگیری کردیم؟
Exactly preventing them what? Denying access to where? We have been, not according to us, according to every other subject matter expert in the world, we have been subject to the most intrusive inspection regime in history. But let's assume this falsehood that has been portrayed in the media is true. Is Israel the sheriff for the IAEA? And then to become the aggressor in such a bloody manner and to target our civilians, our military leadership, our scientists, our most elite scientists? Where within this framework does Israel sit that can attack at will, target men, women, children, media centers, hospitals?
What is that book that you hold there?
This is a book portraying the innocent civilians martyred in Israel's attack.
This is Iran? What happened to the people who died in Iran?
Yes, of course.
When you flip through that book, what do you think?
These were military officials?
Hate.
And I don't understand those who keep dishing out slogans about human rights and democracy and international norms. It doesn't sit well with this reality. If you are really seeking to prevent us from nuclear weapon capability, which we were not seeking to begin with, why didn't you just attack those installations? Which international legal organization issued them the permission to do so? But let's assume I, as an individual, am a guilty entity of such and such activity or crime. Does that give someone the right to target my entire home? My wife, my daughter, my grandchildren, because I, in their mind, am guilty of something? Now, is this human comportment? Is this human dignity? How can we talk to such entities?
As a leader, I wonder, how do you give the people of Iran hope right now? You are still in this conflict, if you will, with different countries. You're having problems with the economy. You've mentioned the problems with water as well in Iran. There are sanctions that have not been lifted. How do you give your people hope?
Well, you see, when I took my responsibility, my initial slogan and most heartfelt slogan was to have unity and cohesion domestically and internationally and brotherly relations with the neighboring countries. We do have increased unity and cohesion in the country. Our people used to have vast differences of opinion in certain parts and groups, but this 12-day illegal aggression increased our unity and cohesion. These same people, far greater than 50 percentile of people who responded to opinion polls, are saying that they're of the opinion that we must seek nuclear weapons in order to prevent further illegal aggression. So the reality becomes that the average Iranian is willing to endure hardships, but prevent future aggression against their territorial integrity. All of the countries in the region during the 12-day war condemned Israel and said they are willing to assist us, and these relations are being built upon on a daily basis. We do have problems, that's undeniable, but there is no problem anywhere in the world to which there is not a solution. All of the problems require different solutions, of course, but through sincere and transparent cooperation, all of these can be overcome with the foresight and insight of our supreme leader. I do believe that we will overcome our most oppressive challenges.
Mr. President, I want to make sure I understand you correctly. Are you then saying you think it is also your role to continue Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon, to do the will of your people?
It is against our belief, it is against our faith, it is against our ideology, not just for us, but for any human entity, for any nation. No one must have access to such destructive, inhuman, and inhumane weapons. That is our core belief, and it is not subject to change.
Okay. Last week marked the 3-year anniversary of the death of Mahsa Amini in the custody of your nation's morality police. The reason she was detained was the hijab law and requirements of women to wear a hijab in public. At the time, you spoke out against what happened to her. You spoke out publicly against what happened to her. Where do you stand right now on whether women should wear the hijab?
My position hasn't changed. I'm the same human being with the same beliefs, with the same ideologies. Human beings have a right to choose. And the type of management, if you will, oversight that we had in our country at that time on that specific subject matter was less than appropriate. Part of the problem is that, yes, we didn't have appropriate management of our internal issues and implementation, but the rest of it is also the world blowing things out of proportion when it comes to Iran. As you mentioned, I took very crystal clear positions in speeches that I gave in certain places and mosques. I clearly said this should not have occurred. But undeniably, the way the world behaved in the aftermath of such a death, the Europeans, the United States, even the United States became so hot over this topic that passed a law in the US Congress. Really, one human life means all of that to you, and of course each human life is priceless. But then it doesn't match with the rest of their comportment. On a daily basis, hundreds of people are being killed in Lebanon, in Gaza, all over Palestine, in Yemen and Syria. Yet no one bats an eye. Why? These are less human beings. What America and the Europeans have done is portrayal that is unfounded. We, of course, disagreed with what occurred, and our heart bleeds. However, what they did, they blew things out of proportion. They put things under the microscope to serve their own purposes.
Last question for you, Mr. President. I do know you speak a little bit of English. You studied here in the United States. Is there a message you can share to the American people in English for our viewers?
At the time, something specific doesn't come to mind, and the reason is that I have such profound feelings that I want to express to everyone, the American people included, and most of what I'm fluent in English are scientific and medical and diagnostic terminology and cardiovascular terminology. So I will not be able to appropriately and respectfully express the depth of my feelings and share those with the American people.
I'll ask you a simple question then. For the Americans at home, does Iran want any more war?
We do not wish for America be monopolizing the tax resources and the result of the hard work of American citizens and bring those resources to the Middle East and endanger the position of the American citizens and the American values and allow apartheid behavior to take shape in the region. The American people's resources should be used to bring peace and stability throughout the world.
Mr. President, I thank you for your time.
I thank you. I wish you the very best. And all of the people throughout the United States of America, may God bless you all.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.